Welcome everybody to a very special edition of
Wait, man, this is not on cooldown, man.
It's a special edition of On Cooldown because today we're gonna do a most fun DPS tier list based on our experiences. It's not taking note of the meta or sims or whatever. It's just what we enjoyed the most paired up with a little bit of DPS rankings, because you know you want to be
you want to not do tank level damage.
Yeah, and a little bit of utility and so on. This was something that a lot of people asked for, so maybe you're thinking about, hey, what I'm going to main when the Shadowlands expansion launches. Well, here's a good insight.
From our perspective anyway, and we have played pretty much all of them on beta right now over the course of the beta.
Alpha and beta.
So we play a bunch of them on live as well with the pre-patch, so we kind of have a little bit of insight on all of them. But again, it's kind of subjective, but we do like to keep an open mind because we have been dabbling in all of the specs for over almost 2 years now.
Oh yeah.
So we kind of have a feel about how specs change patch to patch and how they actually feel when nobody gives them enough credit.
Of course, that's the thing, right? It's based on our experience, it's our input. Okay, take it as you want it. We think it's a fun idea, it's about goddamn time, changes occur all the time. And by the way, if you're new here, just remember you can always help out with a subscribe and notification bell. We do class guides, 2 class guides per week. We do the Friday on Cooldown weekly WoW news show, the podcast, Mocast, Warcraft, Beyond World of Warcraft. But without further ado, let's get it on. So who are we going to talk about first, Flame?
Well, let's just take them in order and take the Arms Warrior first.
Oh yeah, so Arms Warrior. Okay, I played Arms Warrior at the beginning of the alpha a little bit because I was just dinging my live Arms Warrior to 120. It did feel good that you weren't that much dependent on, what was the passive?
Deep Wounds.
Deep Wounds.
Yeah.
The only thing is, right now, when you play Warrior, you don't feel as potent as some of the other melees. But that being said, one thing that is true about Arms Warrior, and this has been true in all of the expansions, it scales. So you might think it's shit now, which is not. I wouldn't call it shit. But it's definitely not a SA tier. I won't put it there just
No,
now.
I don't. The thing is, Arms Warrior had also a bunch of talents being changed, especially in the AoE section. Now Cleave replaces Sweeping Strikes, and that's kind of like shaky grounds to talk about. So the thing is, guys,
is it fun though?
It's fun. Arms was always fun, and it's so fun to see big-ass mortal strikes. So in terms of fun, mechanically, Arms felt good when I played it, when we did the testing. The damage is lackluster. It's clearly lackluster, but then again, tuning will always happen. The utility is still there. Battle Shock was kind of nerfed, but then again, you don't have any external ways to provide Battle Shock to your group, so you could say that there's a reason for that to be there. The problem with transitioning from BFA is that the burst with Test of Might and stuff like that is gone, and I don't know if they successfully filled that gap, in my opinion. So I'm a little bit iffy with Arms at the moment.
Yeah, not yet. It's still a fun spec, but you don't feel that same reward you felt in BFA, at least. I know some of you didn't because it was mostly a passive damage, but still, it is still fun and you can do pretty decent with it. But let's see, where are we gonna put Arms? I'm thinking of more of a C.
I was going for at most.
What the fuck am I doing?
See, that's you just said it. You just said it that you were gonna be there.
All right, sorry. I'm thinking about C tier.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I was gonna go B just to be like super generous, but I think C is kind of fair.
It's pretty decent.
Like it's obviously we're talking mostly PV here because in PvP Arms is still bringing unique tools to the table, so that's gonna be good.
We tested a lot on dungeons and raids and stuff, so that's about it. PV. All right. Let's move along to Assassination Rogue, one of my mains in BFA. I have played it much more than the Arms Warrior, and as biased as I am with Subtlety, Assassination is not that bad still. I'll say it like this, it's super fun to play. I strongly believe it's the easiest spec to play out of all of the 3 rogue specs. It's just not the king anymore. Right, so if you're coming from BFA thinking about maining Assassination Rogue, you'll be fine, but you'll not be the king anymore in your rogue department because Subtlety will take that role. That being said,
I think Assassination still has, from its design, because I've played it in beta, but I've played it a long time, and I was actually happy with it.
Oh yeah.
But from its design, you still have to choose between going a single target and an AoE.
Oh yeah, that's that was always its main dish. It wasn't it was a problem in BFA because you always have to switch around essences and traits and all of that. It shouldn't be a big problem anymore in Shadowlands. It's just a couple of covenants you have to look out for, a couple of legendaries. Overall, it has good numbers DPS wise. It's not like the bottom of the pack. It's still fun to play. It's a rogue.
I think it's living in the shadow of sub right now. Yeah. But I did want to mention something very specific to Outlaw too. Yeah, I've seen the Outlaw numbers. At least on pre-patch, it's crazy. But I did want to say one thing about Assassination, and that is, I think it's Shiv, because Shiv applies a stronger dose of the poison. I think that only does that for Assassination.
It also does it for the other rogue specs when it applies the slow to 70%. That's what the Shiv does for the other specs. The thing is, utility-wise, regardless if you're playing Outlaw or Sub or Assassination, it's still there. You have the blinds, you have the saps, you have the kicks, you have Shroud of Concealment. I think Shroud of Concealment is baseline for all of them right now.
Yeah, it's baseline for all of them. Yeah.
So
it has been.
It's still fun to play. So if you're thinking of maining it, but not retaining that position, especially in single target, it's fine.
I would classify it as the simple spec of the rogue. If you have to go with it with like a entry-level spec, Assassination would probably be the best way to go.
Yeah, I'm thinking C tier as well this time around. What do you think?
I was gonna put it into B because the utility subclasses arms by a large margin. And
that's true.
Let's say if you're a rogue but you don't want to play sub or outlaw and you play Assassination, you might still be better off than playing arms, I would say.
But for the biggest criteria, being fun, hell yeah, it's a B tier for sure.
It's
All right. Let's move along to the recently nerfed.
I think pretty much everybody got nerfed recently, but Survival
Hunter. Okay, so I'm just gonna say this right off the bat. Survival, in my eyes, is the most fun spec out of the hunters by a long shot.
Oh yeah.
But this is. Are you in the same boat?
I agree as well. It's in the at least top 5 best designed specs in terms of damage and rotation and mechanics. It's missing a finishing touch. It's obviously missing a little bit of damage because with survival in AoE, you can do all sorts of cool things. You have all sorts of cool talent that are just not balanced properly. And it feels like you're sweating your balls off to
accomplish.
Kind of. It's very satisfying. It's very satisfying where it's up in the meters. It's one of the most satisfying specs to actually get the best damage output on. But it's weird. Arcane Shot requires a bow. I think they've changed so Kill Shot doesn't require a bow anymore.
That being said, that's the thing about survival, right? It's one of those classes similar to Sub Rogue actually, where once you manage to play it properly and pull off all the proper mechanics of the spec, it feels so good. The only downside is, as Flame mentioned, the damage isn't quite there. You have other specs that have to do way less.
I cannot compete with BM and Marksman. If you're gonna
Marksman is the thing to go. Like, it's all around good meta. But again, if you're looking to have fun and not caring to be number 1 on the DPS meters, let's put it like that, then survival is definitely a go-to tier. It's one of the most fun specs to play on.
It's a really good learning, it has a really good learning curve, and it's very satisfying to pull off the rotation, and survival has always excelled at pure single target. It's kind of like Arcane Mage.
Basically.
So even in pure single target, you might still do damage, but then again, survival has gotten a lot of flack over the last couple of months, over throughout beta as well. So there's a chance that Blizzard might take a closer look at it, so to buff its stuff. But yeah, you have to realize that if you do pick survival, you'll be living in the shadow of BM and Marksman. And people are like, why are you playing survival? But it is melee. It's a different feel. You have your pet interaction, and the only melee pet spec in the game. So that's, for me, I would say, in terms of fun, and added all the others would probably be A tier.
A tier. Oh, okay.
We're talking fun here. It's
fun. But listen. It has, so in here, I agree, it's super fun, but just the damage is just too low. It will pull it off. So I'm thinking more of a B tier with Assassination just because it has much lower damage than Assassination.
I think it's fair, B tier is, It
has
has potentials of going at least 1 tier higher.
And by the way, guys, we're going to have guides for all of these specs after Shadowlands launches, okay? So, and then we're going to go much more in depth on how everything works. But one of my mains to be had in Shadowlands, we're talking about the Windwalker Monk. All right, boys. So I played Windwalker Monk since MOP, more or less. I played it much more seriously, let's say, in BFA. It was tons of fun. It didn't have the best reputation damage-wise, but once you can manage all of its intricacies, you could get some decent numbers, both the single target and AoE. And it's more or less the same thing in Shadowlands.
Yeah. Yeah, the fun aspect and the mechanics of playing Windwalker is very interactive, very satisfying.
Oh, man.
You still have Whirling Dragon Punch that can kill you because its animation is too long.
You gotta love it, man.
Yeah,
I know it's long, but it's
the
like...
thing is, yeah, see what I feel like here is like if Demon Hunters can move while they blade dance, monks should be able to move while
I agree.
Whirling Dragon Punch. I think that would bump the spec up in people's personal tier list. The problem with Windwalker is again the damage output. In single target, it's just not there. It has really cool legendaries, and it actually matters because some of the legendaries really focus on the single target, so that can actually improve the spec. But it's so far from what I've played and from what I've seen other people play, it doesn't come close to like the average hitters, the warlocks, the DKs, the mages. It's just, and single target is just not there. In AoE, it's always good to fist everything.
Yeah, AoE it's pretty good. But I'm gonna add to that the top the fact that Windwalker monks also provide great utility. Remember, Ring of Peace is one of the best things you can have in both raids and dungeons.
In-cap is also good.
In-cap, of course, the AoE stun, not to mention the in-cap as well. So there's a lot of utility too. It's not as bad damage-wise as Survival, at least from what I played. So I'm putting this bad boy to an A tier.
Yeah, Monk is not my main, but I cannot argue with that.
I'm subjective, I know, but it's fun. Once you pull it off, it's super fun to play. It's rewarding, even with the low damage single target. You can still do good.
We are talking here about damage is important, but we are talking about fun aspect as well and how engaging the spec can be. So yeah, I agree. Windwalker is a strong A.
Okay, next up, Stan, are you here with us? Feral Druid. Oh boy.
Oh my god. All right. So I have a little beef to pick with Druid because with Blizzard because Druid has been one of my love specs, one of the first classes I've ever played, and Feral is always what you started with. I was always whenever I think of Druid, I think of Feral. Think of druids in like Diablo and you transform into shit, you know. My problem with Feral is that blood talents is kind of like the only interesting mechanic. It can have a lot of finishers. Its talents are not really that balanced, and clearly Feral is not putting out the damage nowhere near. It's a fun spec. It does feel like it could benefit a little bit more from a closer death design, a design towards bringing more death to the spec, because it does sometimes feel like a budget assassination because you are building to finishers, keep maintaining bleeds and optimizing dot damage, which is kind of assassination. Obviously, it's not the same spec. Clearly, you're still a druid at the end of the day, and they did try to build the druid theme of it with Heart of the Wild in Shadowlands, so that can be good. But then again, are you ever going to tank? That's a cool fantasy to have, and it always came down to druids. If you remember, like the old times where you swapped out a kitty, you did something in Valence form, druid form. Yeah, that was the aspect that separated feral druids from assassination rogues. I don't think that still is true to this day, even with Heart of the Wild. And from a pure DPS spec perspective, it's a little bit boring. I'm sorry, but it is a little bit boring.
So can we agree we put it on D tier here? With all the love we have for ferals, it's going on D tier.
Yeah, if a spec has to go on D tier, well, there's one. So
I know. But listen, I cannot say too much about ferals because I haven't played feral ever, so this is why I'll let Flame. But I know the perception from Stan, our Patreon, who also used to main feral, and also Flame played a lot of it as well. I know how people feel about it. It's kind of shit. I'm just gonna listen to the bigger boys. So
and you haven't actually played the next one either.
We'll see. Unholy DK.
Oh my god!
This is one of your main specialities.
Yeah,
so
DK has been my main spec in the last year or so. My main class. And it's gonna be my main alt in BFA, the first one that I'm gonna level after Paladin, and Unholy is a blast. I think Unholy is one of the best melee specs in the game.
Oh shit!
In terms of design, and it's the way it is in beta in pre-patch right now. It actually has 2 builds, and that's kind of cool because that's kind of how we want to. I don't know how they will scale in Shadowlands, if both of them will still be viable. I hope they will be, because that just makes the spec more interesting. Unholy has pet management. Unholy has disease management. It has one of the most intricate rotations, especially in AoE. You have awesome cooldowns you can play around. You have the DK utility, the grips, the stuns, the chains of ice.
course.
And let's not forget about the anti-magic zone. I mean, we are talking about damage numbers here, but anti-magic zone is so good that it's baseline right now. So for me, DK it goes into S tier. No.
Oh shit! We got our first S tier.
Unholy is clear S tier.
It's beautiful. I always like to see Unholy DK gameplay. I gotta admit, I've always been afraid to go into it. It feels so much is going on, but I love when people they pull it off. It's a beautiful thing. All right, we have our first S tier, Unholy DK. There you go. Now let's move it on to Outlaw Rogue. Now Outlaw Rogue. For the majority of BFA was the go-to melee AoE bad boy.
Yeah.
It still does pretty good, I would say among the best in Shadowlands 2 in dungeons.
The damage is pretty good. Yeah.
But yeah, there was one thing about Outlaw that always bugged me in BFA. It was the single target damage. It was there, but it could not compete with Assassination. Never in. Now, it seems it's a bit better. It can compete with Assassination, but it won't be able to compete with Subtlety out of the 3 rogue specs. So I have tried it. It's still, so if you're into like the whole mechanic of Outlaw is really fun. I like it because it's basically playing around with your cooldowns and reducing them all the time because of the the passive they have where they reduce the the passive they have that reduce cooldowns all the time. I forgot what it's called.
Right.
It's really cool.
Blades or?
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. So it's much more fluid. It's not as easy as Assassination, although it's not complicated either, right? So I would put like Outlaw in terms of like skill cap, but higher than Assassination, but lower than Subtlety. That's my 2 cents in it. It's super fun. It has decent numbers. I would put it somewhere in the B or A tier.
Oh, A tier for me. Have you played it in the?
I played it.
I think the addition of Dread Blades is a really good thing.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Dread Blades.
Roll
Jesus
the bones,
Christ,
man! You cannot forget about Roll the Bones. Roll
Yeah.
the Bones is actually fun to play right now because you're not incentivized to keep, refreshing buffs. So that kind of key mechanic is gone. So for me, Outlaw is a decent A.
Okay, we put it in A definitely. Oh boy, look who it is! We have 2 specs here that are worth discussing. Enhancement, Shaman. I'll leave it to Flame because
I have been incredibly hyped about the enhancement when it was starting its design.
How many reworks did we get through for enhancement in Shadow?
Not as many as for Elemental, I don't think, but a lot, and they still seem to be missing the mark. At first, they made the enhancements have like no logic. Like there was like these 3 separate mechanics that weren't interacting with each other, maintaining Flame Shock, Maelstrom Weapon, and Wind Furies and Storm Strike. Like I don't know, it was and Frost
all
Shocks.
over the
like,
place.
Enhancement has a lot of potential, but it's disappointing at the very least. There are some cool interactions with the talents that they've made. It's going into the right direction, but I feel like it's definitely not there. Enhancement is one of the specs that I thought about when they announced Shadowlands so quick. I was like, man, Enhancement is not done. For me, Enhancement is also another spec that I hold dear because it's the first spec that I've dinged 60 with in vanilla.
Emotions.
And it was I was always attached to the Wind Fury hits and crits.
Oh yeah, I remember.
But BFA Enhancement is way more fluid, even if it's a little bit more gimped in terms of spells. It's more satisfying to play than Shadowlands. I don't know. I haven't seen any good changes to Enhancement lately. Personally, for me, with the sadness in my heart, I have to put it to D tier.
But is it still fun though? That's the
not as much.
Okay,
no.
so we have I think this is no surprise, right? We have Feral and Enhancement in the D tier. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there, right? So you said it yourself, clunkiness, doesn't feel as smooth. Both these specs don't feel as smooth, and of course the damage and utility. So we'll just have to see if things happen.
So you know that guys, that this is kind of like these are kind of like the meme specs. We're not trying to build on the meme. This is actually from our subjective opinion. These specs are just not there.
It's not about the meme. It's about raising awareness. These specs need to get some love as well. But nevertheless, let's move on to Frost Decay, which I have tried a little bit. This is the DK spec, that felt more easier for me. I know it's a lot more intricacies in it, but I still don't feel it can compete with Unholy.
No, not by a long shot, and not after the recent nerfs. So the thing with Frost is that I think it was in a more decent place about 2 to 3 weeks ago, before they did the big nerfs.
It was pretty good, yeah.
So before they nerfed two-hander, because actually we are constantly in chat with the Acris DK boys, pretty much on point because I'm a big DK fan. And I know for a fact that before the big nerfs, dual wield was still better than two-hander, and obviously got two-hander now. But two-hander was like competitive in single target, and obviously it's pretty good in PvP. Might still be the best in PvP, but big obliterate crits were there. They were still not OP, not an OP enough to be nerfed. So I don't know exactly what the design process and thinking is of the devs. So I guess we'll have to see. But Frost for me is a little bit boring. Outside of PvP, it's a little bit boring. Breath of Syndragosa is the only interesting mechanic, and we've been playing that for like, what, 4 years now? The talents haven't changed almost at all. We have one new talent that's incredibly meh. It almost does nothing. From a mechanical perspective, it probably doesn't impact Breath of Syndragosa almost at all enough to be warrant a talent pick. We did get Frostworm's Fury, the big Syndragosa. Cool. Yeah, that's cool. Got that baseline. That's pretty good. Frost is fun, but gets boring quick. For me, in terms of fun, I would put it's a B for me, but it could be an A. As far as I'm concerned.
Really? I thought it was going much lower than that. Okay, I can see it as a B.
No, it's a B because it has potential of really cool builds, but Ice Cap doesn't make sense without the BFA Azurite traits and without Chill Streak.
Yeah. All right, let's move along to Subtlety Broke. Man, here it is. Go. So Subtlety, it's basically my love letter to World of Warcraft. I think it's, for me, it always felt like the most complete DPS spec out of them all. Because it had everything, and in order to pull off big numbers, you had to pull off some good mechanics within the spec. If you didn't know how to play it right, time it right, you were shit. It had its shining BFA in Mythic Zul. Then it fell off. You never heard of Sub too much.
They hit it in the head, man, with a nerf hammer.
Yeah, it never recovered. But nevertheless, in Shadowlands, Sub is back, and it's back strong. It's, I think, among the better performing melees, although in the latest numbers runs, it was sort of in the middle of the pack. Nevertheless, that's Mythic Sims. We're not Mythic Raiders, so we're for the people here. But in terms of being a fun spec to play, 100%. It's one of the most rewarding DPS specs you can play. Once you pull it off, it feels good. You do the numbers. You have a lot of utility. Double Shadow Step to kick that guy, kidney shot the other guy. I'm talking PvE here, okay? Yeah. You have the blind, you have the shroud. And also, the main thing about Subtlety is you have access to your burst much more faster, right? And within your burst, you also become super useful because of the cheap shots. In dungeons, it's really cool because you can put your find weakness on a lot of them and also increase their damage with Prey on the Weak.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing to play. I recommend this spec 100%. Even if they nerf it, there has been a lot of nerfs to it, especially recently. Black Powder, which was like the go-to thing, finisher for AoE, that got nerfed. It's all fine and dandy. At the end of the day, it was performing a little bit too good to be true, but it's not downscale. Now, in comparison to Outlaw and Assassination, I would recommend this one because, yes, it is, in my eyes, the most complicated, the most kill cap spec, but it has a good entry-level point. Yeah. So you can get into it, start dabbling, and once you get a little bit accustomed to the mechanics and how it works, it's amazing.
Yeah, so, it's satisfying. I played it as well in Shadowlands, and it was a big contender for my main in Shadowlands. And as an Unholy player, because I like complicated stuff, I can definitely say that Sub is probably the most complicated spec in the game. If you want to play it, if you want to play it right and use your entire kit in PV, I'm not even gonna touch PvP.
If it's all different
for me, Sub has been really fun and it's a strong S tier for me.
Oh yeah, for me too. I mean, it's clear, guys, that our mains are probably gonna be in the S tier because we play them the most. Yeah. And we decided on these mains because of how fun they are. If they're rewarding in the sense that, okay, you're playing them right, you get some numbers, that's good too. It counters in. It has a good weight in the decision, and if it's useful. So right now, up until this point, Unholy Decay and Subtlety are checking all these marks. So we're good with that. Now, Fury Warrior. Let's get to Fury Warrior.
Okay.
Fury Warrior is fun, man.
This is a tragedy. Okay, so Fury Warrior has just recently got buffed on the one-handers. So I've tested Fury Warrior. It's probably one of the most tested specs that I've done in Shadowlands beta. I think I've run through 2 sets of dungeons separately, more than the other specs, because it was sometimes I was pulling off like decent damage, was surprisingly hard. Like I had to really time all my GCDs, whereas in BFA, I mean, you could mess up a little bit and your damage might suffer, but it felt like in Shadowlands you were more punished for it.
Oh, yeah.
The damage is not there, and you did mention scaling for arms, but I do have to say this: Fury always scaled better than arms in PvE. Fury was always, arms was always better in the first tiers, and then Fury scaled in the latest, in the end of the expansion. That's just how Fury works. I feel like it could scale a little bit better, but it's interesting because when I tested it, one-handers were doing better than two-handers in terms of performance. There are a couple of interesting new talents. A lot of talents have changed for Fury, and a couple of them are actually interesting, but they're just not balanced. They are making tweaks here and there for Fury Warrior, so there's a chance that it could be a really good spec. This is in terms of damage performance. In terms of fun, it's really fun. Now with the addition of Onslaught, you have a new button to press, and you might think that's it's just a new button, but it actually matters.
It matters.
Because it does have a couple of conditions behind it to make it worth it. And I think with the changes of Reckless Abandoned and you know, adding a little bit more options, like the way Fury's play right now, you kind of have two builds on the pre-patch, so it's fun. If these scale, you can have more options. In Shadowlands, it can be an interesting spec to play. It does require a little bit more oomph, but I don't think it's on the same page as arms. I would put it into the B tier for now, but it's probably more fun than. For me, Fury is more fun than Frost, and probably more fun than Survival, but it's doing less damage than him. So I think it's a kind of a good balance there.
It's good. It's going into the B tier. All right, we are missing here in this tier lead the Havoc Demon Hunter. We'll get to it last, okay? Because that's I noticed that is missing, so we'll have magically appeared through the power of editing. But let's talk about Red Paladin. Now you go first because you're maining Red Paladin. I mained Red Paladin my whole life. So I'm gonna go after you.
All right. So I've decided to main Paladin all throughout Shadowlands, at least in the first patch, because I like Red and I like Prod and I actually like all of the specs. They're pretty fun, and I'm also a tank at heart, so obviously Paladin is gonna tickle that fancy. But going into Red a little bit blind. Last time I actually played Red more than just for a video was in WoD. When it was a fucking light show and one of the funnest specs to play, and it was not that now. But, and I have to make a strong argument for Red in pre-patch, because right now, Red, regardless of how strong Azurite is really fucking fun. Right now, Red, all of the main damage talent rows are almost equal in performance. Almost equal in damage output. That's the ideal spec for me to play, because I want to know, oh, I can change that and have a different rotation, have a different approach to the encounter. And that's always good. Variety for me is a big ass selling point. Not to mention that Red in pre-patch is fun on its own, but in Shadowlands, once it gets Conduit, the final verdict.
I missed that. That was from WoD actually.
So, the thing is, Red is incredibly mobile. I've played a lot of DK and I felt incredibly mobile on DK, but it doesn't feel like it punishes you more than it does on Red. At least
remember we had this discussion.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's the encounters that they're designing in Shadowlands, because there's too many short bursts of movement that you need. If there's like one every minute, you're good. But if it's like, oh, in 20 seconds I have to be there, then it sucks. And that's where I want to get at, because with the Final Verdict edition, and with that essentially makes your finisher have a little bit of range. That matters a lot, because if you can't follow shit, even if you're not fast enough, you can still throw a judgment, throw a blade, and then still do a finisher, and that matters a lot when it comes to damage output.
Plus the sound.
Oh, and the fucking hammers flying, oh my god. I was like just doing that in AoE. I didn't care for damage, I just wanted to see that fucking hammer go on. So in terms of, so Marcia is gonna pick up the slack in a second, but for me, Red, and if it maintains the variety that it has in pre-patch, it's going to be an S tier, no questions asked in Shadowlands.
Yeah, it's
in terms of fun and performance.
It's well, what can I say about Red? It's been my main the whole life. Like we're Red and Rogue and Sub Rogue. So Red in Shadowlands is 100% a fun spec. It's definitely on that side of, hey, you won't be the first DPS, but you won't be at the bottom of the barrel either.
No, not even close.
Plus the soul fantasy of having some decent utility in terms of being a paladin. You have some strong heals, you have sacrifice back, which was I think it was iconic for a Red Paladin's utility, and also the fact that they cooked up this new talent, Final Reckoning, which I feel is like one of the most quintessential looking and feeling talents they could ever have, because it's like, you know, that big ball of
reminds me of Crusader from Diablo 3.
Oh yeah. So I'm not gonna say too much on it because, you know, Flame pretty much covered all of it. I'm just gonna say that I always loved playing Red, regardless of its performance. It always had that something about it, that fantasy going in. And right now, looking at the numbers and the performance and the fun, mostly it's 100% an S tier.
Yeah.
I know people are gonna flame about this. Oh, what do you mean Red is gonna be S tier? Guys, remember, we're doing this based on what we think is fun. That's the main thing. Then we're looking a little bit at the numbers and the utility, but fun is the key factor here. And last one, Havoc Demon Hunter.
Havoc. Wow.
Okay, I played Havoc Demon Hunter.
You can go first.
I can definitely say that I'm a bit happy because Havoc Demon Hunter is not as strong as we all know it was in BFA. But that being said, when we went into BFA, first off, and we dinged our Demon Hunters 120, they were pretty much shit. But they also scaled pretty well, and they also had the additions of a couple of Azerite traits that made it what it was in BFA. In Shadowlands, you can definitely feel some of the losses, not totally. It has been nerfed, okay? It has been nerfed 100%. Now listen, if you're not into, you know, super complex mechanics and, you know, not looking always to be punished if you do a mistake, Demon Hunter is still the way to go. It's easy to get into. It will do good. It won't be the top motherfucker, but it will do good. Even in BFA, it wasn't the top.
Still does good AoE damage.
Yeah, 100%. And there's something about Demon Hunter that is fun in terms of like mobility, and I'm just gonna say it, man. Smashing random buttons, doing damage.
We're playing paladins and DKs. You know we can appreciate some ability.
Of course. So it's definitely okay. I'll let you go and then I'll tell you where I'm gonna place it.
All right. So the history with me and Havoc was my main in Legion, and I fell in love with the momentum build because I like the fantasy of I have to zoom and dash all across the battlefield to deal the most amount of damage.
And time it.
We're not going to talk about timing it and optimizing and all of that, but the fantasy of, you know, being a super fast mobile all over the place spec, and that's how you did your damage, that was incredible for me. Not to mention being a big ass demon. I mean, and it did get nerfed. And I do want to strongly make this point because I don't think enough people know. Now, this is my personal opinion, but I think I'm almost on the money here with this. Havoc's damage has never been the best damage. It has never had the most single target damage, and it has never had, even when it was OP, it has never had the most AoE damage. What Havoc had was consistency. It had very, very strong cooldowns in terms of blur. 1 minute wall with dodge incorporated. It was way too much. It had passive magic damage reduction when probably no other class has anything like that, except for cooldowns. So that made it incredibly strong, plus the sustain. Plus that, the rotation to deal the most AoE damage was the rotation to do the most single target damage. So there's really, you wouldn't have to sacrifice anything for Havoc to gain a benefit. That was the problem, and I think this is maybe what most people don't like about the spec. That aside, Havoc is incredibly fun to play. With I haven't tested the new nerfs and buffs legendaries because Blizzard has been working around with the Havoc legendaries recently. I'm glad we have the artifact ability back. That's also interesting. I do feel like the talents, some of the talents are interesting. The one that they made, they're not yet optimized. But if they can be, then that's great. And some of the legendaries, like the glaive legendaries, are super fun. The summon another demon hunter to I-beam with you also is super fun. I think Havoc, in terms of fun, it's around A tier for me. Its damage is probably going to be a lot better, and its damage is not as bad as people think, but it does feel like it's been hit in the head a lot.
I will add to this that because a lot of people got used to Havoc Demon Hunters like doing the same type of rotation both in AoE and single target, it's basically, I think the most single, I don't think there was any other spec that could not have been punished for these types of things, right? Like,
no, not that I think
if you can, you would get away with mistakes. That's the whole point, and this is why there was a lot of memes about Havoc. But don't get it twisted. There's a lot of intricacies if you want to play to the highest level.
Yeah.
So Fun, 100%. Damage, it's there, and it's probably gonna be even better, I'm sure of it, because it's still their poster boy. Utility, well, of course, there's AoE stuns, there's incaps,
darkness.
There's a lot of it, right? So it's we're gonna put it in the A tier now, but I'm sure if we're gonna make another one like this after the expansion launches, give it a couple
I'm
months.
telling you, if they make momentum viable, it's an S tier for me.
For sure,
easy,
for sure.
Easy
for
S
sure.
tier.
All right, but this is it. Okay, so let's see. The S tiers are with Unholy Decay, Subtlety Rogue, and Red Paladin, right? Most fun melee DPS mix in Shadowlands. For us. Okay, if you care about our opinion, well, here it is. There's also good options in Windwalker Monk and Outlaw Rogue.
And Havoc Demon Hunter, yeah, they're pretty good. And I do want to say that I was a little bit sad about putting Fury into B, but if Fury had enough damage, it could easily be an A tier because it's like right there with the spammy, fast-paced, and Warrior is also a very mobile spec. But Frost Decay and Survival are a little bit underwhelming, and Combat is just, it's hard to put Combat, I think, on the, not Combat, Jesus, Outlaw, I'm saying Combat now.
You see the icon there.
Yeah, it's hard to put it on the same tier as Assassination, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to put Assassination on the A tier, but it's still a B, just because it feels, for me, it feels way too easier to pull shit off. All right, it has the damage, but it feels way easier. I feel if you play Subtlety or Outlaw, if you're doing your shit right, you get much more a feeling of a reward from it.
Sanguine could be an interesting build to,
well, it used to be in Legion.
Bump Assassination higher there on the tier list in terms of, intricacies.
Yeah, we'll see. Arms Warrior, sadly...
Arms has potential. Arms has potential, but it seems a little bit wonky. It seems like, I don't know if people like sweeping strikes being replaced by cleave. Yeah. I think cleave spreading deep wounds was how Arms had consistent AoE in high mythic keys, and you don't have that, and you don't have Test of Might Burst either.
Well, so it's a C tier. It's just there. Yeah. I mean, all specs have potential at the end of the day, and we're actually rooting for ferals and enhancements to get some love, because for the longest time there was not much representation or love for these specs, at least during BFA. Hopefully, Shadowlands in the future will get them better.
Yeah.
But
this is kind of what we think right now, and obviously this is our opinion. This doesn't mean that the specs
are meta. It's not.
It doesn't mean that if you pick Feral, you won't get into groups. You won't get into groups, but that's not the point. The thing is, even Feral can output some serious numbers, and even Enhancement can be there. Although it's going to be a clear difference between, let's say, a Feral in AoE and an Unholy in AoE. But this is what we think about the specs. You can definitely let us know what you guys think of the specs, and if we got anything wrong, we know you're gonna let us know
in the comment
section down below.
Of course, and big shout out to all of our Patreons who support these types of videos. This has been a special edition of On Cooldown. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our Twitch subs, viewers, and followers, our Discord gang. Remember, we're doing all of these class guides and On Cooldown videos, special editions, and mocast podcasts like every single week.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So tune in.
Have a nice weekend.
Catch you next time.
Bye. Next time. Catch you.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.